Hello, I'm Jay from the Ripping Resource, and today I'm going to show you how you can rip the HD 2D characters from the Ace Attorney series. To demonstrate this, I'm going to use Emma Sky's Investigations version. So this will be at a 3/4 perspective, which will make it slightly different from, say, Apollo Justice or Trilogy, but the steps are generally the same, so I advise that this guide is, while not one size fits all, is pretty close to what you'll be doing if you're ripping, say, Trilogy or Apollo Justice. Without further ado, let's begin. So first what you'll want are the character sheets, which I conveniently have open right here. So just drag in the first one, and this will be her normal animation. So these animations generally go sequentially, so the normal will always be the first sheet. At least in my experience, that has been the case. And also what you'll want are character references. And what a reference is it's a DS sprite, so it's the low resolution version, which you will use to compare. For a comparison, I suggest getting the character files from an AO server, and I personally recommend the next chapter, which I will be linking in the description of this video. Their rips I have found to be quite accurate. They're not perfect, but they're fairly accurate, and so I would use them. Now, to navigate through an AO server's files, to find the character that you want to rip, you just have to go... First you'll have to, of course, open the folder, then you'll want to go to Base, Characters, and then from there, you can locate the character that you want to rip. In this case, I want Emma, and her folder is a little different from your average AO server character. Usually, they'll all just be like this. For Emma, that is not the case, because TNC has included every single 2D variation of Emma in one folder. It's just a little more complicated. But it just goes like that. And since we're ripping her normal animation, first we'll have to import this. And make sure that when you import your GIF, you're not dragging it here. You always want to drag it here, because if you open it here, it's going to do that. You don't want that. So make sure you drag it to the bar here, and it'll open it in a separate file. To prepare this for ripping, you'll generally, of course, want to scale it to the resolution of your character. So for both Investigations games and Apollo Justice, this is going to be 1365 by 768. For Trilogy, this number is going to be 2293 by 1290. So when you have your DS reference, go to Image, then Image Size, and then under Height, you'll want to type in 768, and then right here, you want to select Nearest Neighbor. If you use anything else, it'll make it slightly blurry. You want this to be as sharp as possible. It preserves hard edges, like it says here. Next, you'll want to go to Canvas Size, and you'll want to change the width from 1024 to 1365. And that will bring the sprite to exactly the resolution that you're going to be ripping in, so that you can compare it perfectly. And now you want to open a file, and conveniently it's already in 1365 by 768. If it's not, then just make it so. Alright, so now this is open. It might open with this white background. All you have to do is go here, create a new layer, and then delete the background layer, and it'll have a transparent. And you'll know if something is transparent if it has this grid pattern. If it doesn't have this grid pattern, it is not transparent. You want it to be transparent because, well, of course you do. Alright, so what now? Well, you can, by the way, do this. If you press Z, right-click on your canvas, and then press Fit on Screen, it'll just zoom it in perfectly. And you always want these two to be perfectly the same size when you start positioning. So now we're ready to do stuff with our sprite sheet here. First thing you want to do, I just zoom in a little, which you can do by pressing Z and then using left mouse button to drag across your screen, which will zoom in and out. Just a quick little Photoshop tip for you. And then you want to use your select tool to select the piece that you need. And if we zoom in a little, we can see we didn't quite select everything, and you can just use your arrow keys to move the selection wherever you need it to be. And say if you didn't select enough, you could always press Shift, and that will add to your selection. Alright, so now you can copy, Control-C, and paste, Control-V. And so now, what we can do is to position this, we will use this DS sprite. So we want her to be touching the bottom there, and then we need to move her over a little bit to the right. No, went a little too far. Then you can just click back and forth to compare. And that looks just about perfect to me. Alright, now you're ready to start dragging in your pieces. So go back to the Select tool, and in Emma's case it's a little bit weird. Most of the time your character's eyes and mouths will be two separate pieces. Sometimes they will be one. If they're one, like this, it's pretty straightforward. Just select from the very top, and what I usually do is I select down to about the halfway point on the nose, so about there. And then I Control-C, Control-V, and then I match up the eyes. Make sure when you're matching pieces of the sprite, you're using the arrow keys, just so you can get a little more precision. And now you can toggle the layer on and off by pressing this I to see if it is positioned correctly, and it looks like we've done it perfectly on the first try. Now this is important, don't click away or anything like that. Press the Select tool, make sure you press the Select tool, because if you don't, you'll start moving this piece of the sprite all over the place, and you don't want that. Press the Select tool, and then just bring it over here. Control-C, Control-V. If you have this toggled on, then you can just quickly snap it to the positioning of that. It'll be perfect. Alright, and it's very important, by the way, that these two eyepieces are selected at the exact same size, and I'll show you why. So, toggle the layer for your base body off, and then select all of this. Make sure you get all of it. You can alternatively do this using the Magic Wand tool. Just make sure your settings are perfect. We have the perfect settings pinned in the 2D ripping in the TRR Discord, if you want to just have a look at that. Alright, so now what you want to do is you want to toggle this on, and then you want to right-click on your canvas, press Select Inverse. Now press Control-C and press Control-X. And what that's going to do is that's going to cut the eyes out of the base sprite. And now you can just paste them back in because you pressed Control-C. And line them up. And why we do this is because if you don't do this, the little bits of partial transparency, like you can see right here, will overlap with each other and make the edges thicker randomly. And that looks super ugly, and we don't want that. So make sure you do this. Alright, now it's time for the mouths. Same deal, really. Just want to make sure we're selecting everything we didn't select before. Control-C, Control-V. And same process as the eyes, we just line it up. And I'll bring this up here. By the way, it's a good idea to color code these. You can make them any color you want. For this, I'll make the eyes yellow, and I'll make the mouths blue. And we want to select the other one now. Again, exact same size. And this is a case where we would actually want to use the selection tool rather than the magic wand tool to cut the piece of the base sprite out. So just turn this off and make sure you select this perfectly, or else things will not look good. Like that. Toggle the base sprite back on, and same as the eyes. Control C, Control V, or Control X, and then Control V. And then just put that back. Make sure you haven't overlapped anything. And there we go. So now we have our pieces cut out. What now? Well, we're not quite done with the DS sprite, because now we can use this to make the animation. So we can see our first frame here is 0.5 seconds. So let's make that 0.5 seconds. Photoshop has a wonderful selection of default timings that you can select. If you have a really specific timing, like 0.67 or seconds or something like that, you can just press Other, and you can set that here. Alright, so now we can see frame 2, where her eyes are half closed, is 0.1 seconds. And again, Photoshop has a default for that. So let's do this. And, oops, forgot to move that. And color these. Photoshop has a default for that, so we can just select 0.1 seconds. And then, this is important, make sure that when you switch a portion of the sprite, you disable the other part, because then it'll do that exact same effect that we cut the base sprite out to get rid of. You can see that in action right here. Alright, and then we can make 2 more of these, but we go to the middle one, set it to the eyes fully closed, and that'll just save you a bit of time there. Alright, frame 5 we can see is 1 second, which Photoshop has a default for. And now what you can do is you can select all of these, using Shift of course. Then we can just do that. Then we can see that frame 9 is 3 seconds long, so let's go to frame 9. And Photoshop does not have a default for that, so you have to go here, 3 seconds. And make sure that you set these back. Alright. Now you can play the animation. Ta-da! Now we have a fully functional blinking animation. Alright, now I'm going to show you how we export this. So you just want to go here to Save As. Before you do anything else, you want to save the project file, just so you save yourself a bit of time later down the road. So you go to Save As. I already have a project for this, but I'm going to overwrite it. And call it what you're going to call the animation. In this case, I'm going to call it A-normal, because that is what it is. A, of course, denotes it's a blinking animation, and normal denotes the animation name. So I'm just going to save that. And there we go. Now we have this saved. We can start exporting. So there are 2 file types that you'll largely be working with. You'll have GIF and you'll have WebP. If you want to make a GIF for TRR, the first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to go back to Image and set the canvas size to 1024. Because we use the 4:3 aspect ratio for our GIFs, due to the fact that most GIFs in AO are 4:3. So now, to save this as an actual GIF, we just go to Save for Web, and we can, again, view the animation here, but we can just save that as a normal. So now, if we go over to where we saved that, we can see that this is a GIF file. Oh no, what's this? It looks like crap. Well, that's because of the export settings. So what you want to do is you want to go back to your GIF export window, and there are a few things that we need to change here. First is this right here underneath this thing. This doesn't really matter. You can change it if you want. It doesn't seem to change much. But where it says diffusion, by default, you will want to set that to no dither, because dither looks ugly. Now with a 2D sprite, you're really not going to be working with much dither, because of the fact that most 2D sprites don't go over the 256 color limit that GIF has. But just in case it does, you want to make sure that dither is off. And now under matte, you want to select none. Matte is what was making the outlines white. Everything else looks fine, so now we can export this. And it should actually be good this time. If I've remembered everything properly, we should have a perfectly normal, nice looking GIF. Well, about as nice looking as GIF can get, really. So now, I'm going to walk you through making this WebP. So you want to set your canvas size back to 1365, and it's a little different than GIF, but the process is about the same in steps. Just a few more steps at the end. So what you want to do is you want to go to Export, and you want to go to Render Video. And that sounds a little weird, because by default, it will be a video. But you want to go here and select Photoshop Image Sequence. By default, this will be JPEG, set it to PNG. And if you're doing a full rip, you can make this a little easier on yourself by checking this box, Create New Subfolder, and then naming it after the animation. I have a characters folder. I haven't completely set it up, but generally in your characters folder, you'll want to have a folder full of character names, and in those character names is where you'll be saving your animations. I'm just saving it to the characters folder because I really don't care. So we want to save this to a normal, which, like I said, every time you make a new animation, you can just change this and you don't have to make a folder by yourself. And this is really important. Besides making sure that everything else here is right, it's the right resolution, this by default will be none. You want to change this to straight unmatted, or else it'll export with a white background. But this is really important. Change the name to frame, or else the WebP script will not work. And now you can press render. And it's done. Don't worry if the export takes a long time. That is normal. I have a fantastic CPU, which is what your computer uses to render things, and that still took a very, very long time. Photoshop's render is just not very optimized, so don't worry about it taking too long. So now, what we want to do is we want to go to our characters folder, where we have saved our folder full of PNGs here. Oh, it looks like it saved inside of the folder there that I already had. So we can just move these here, and I can just call this Emma. This is how you should structure your characters folder, by the way. So what is this? This is everything you need to make a WebP. It's FFmpeg, FFplay, and FFprobe. And you can get these off of the website, which I will link in the description. And you need all three of these to be in the master folder where your folder full of images is. So let's just move all this stuff. And this right here is the WebP script, which you can get pinned in the respective channels in TRR. Make sure if you're doing 2D, you get the one from the 2D ripping channel. If you're ripping 3D, get the one from the 3D ripping channel. Should be obvious. We can just move this back over here. And all we have to do now is double click on the script, press any key to continue, and bam. WebP is smaller than GIF and looks better, which is why I prefer WebP. By default, this will open with Edge. You can change the default by going here and just saying opens with Google Chrome and apply that. Now it'll just open with Chrome or your web browser of choice, doesn't really matter. And you can double click that, and there you go. A perfect WebP. So those are the basics of 2D ripping. We'll have a few more in-depth tutorials about just certain things you can do to make your life easier pretty soon, but for now, that should cover just about all of it. So thank you for watching, and happy ripping!